Hey guys, Constance here. Welcome back to A Good Life Farm. So I just want to bring you out here in the garden. Not doing a garden tour at the moment, but I will be filming that probably tomorrow. My weekly garden tour. I've been doing one every week and posting them on the weekends. Usually the plan is for Saturday, but sometimes Sunday if that's the way it works out. But every weekend, either way. So the other day I talked about pests, and I mentioned in my video that, the garden tour, that my beans were doing great and I hadn't had any pest issues at all. Well, I no sooner said that, and I think it was the very next day I saw some holes in some bean leaves. And so I came out here and I decided this time around I would just heavily dust it with some DE. I did that with my eggplant that's over there, and so far it seems to be working. If you look down here, there is a whole bunch of leaves that have 0 DE on them, and then a bunch down here that have DE. Well, the ones with no DE have grown since I did the sprinkling 1 week ago, and you can see they're starting to climb up the trellis here. And there's a little bit of damage. So far I have not yet seen what is doing this. It's not too awful, but I'll try and figure it out, because once I can figure out what it is that's doing it, it kind of makes it easier to figure out how to deal with it. So the other day I was out here, and I think it was actually my garden tour video. I talked about how some of these squash plants were doing amazing, and then some others over in this area were just puny and half dead. And you know, there was a couple theories. One of them, which I was really hoping wasn't the case, because it was one I had thought of, was, could it be herbicide damage from the soil or the straw that I'm using as mulch? And I really hoped that wasn't the case, because I've dealt with that damage before, and it's not a good scenario. But my first guess was the heat. We went from, you know, pretty nice temperatures to bam, mid-90s, all of a sudden no rain, you know, hot and dry. And I thought that, well, my hope was that the middle of this raised bed was just too hot, and so I pulled out some of my shade cloth here, and I've had it draped over the plants for the past couple of days. And in that time I've noticed that those puny squash plants are actually doing better. So I really do think it was just the heat. So I have been watering them a little bit deeper and using my shade cloth, and I think we'll just keep doing that, because I think that really is making a difference. You could probably hear the goats back there going crazy, because they know it's just about snack time. They get their treats in the evenings, and they're letting me know about it. So I had opened this up today because it was actually really overcast for most of the day, but it just cleared up. So I'm going to go ahead and put the shade cloth back down and cover these squash plants. Now I'm not too worried about getting the entire bed covered. These plants here on the end, this is the north end of this bed. So during the heat of the day, when most of the heat and the sunlight will be hitting this bed, it'll be coming from that angle a little bit. So this will actually still get slightly sheltered from the sun, although these plants seem to be doing just fine. So it's the middle and the other end that I want to make sure I'm getting that shade cloth over. So today I actually went and visited with a friend at her house, a lady that I know from my Bible study group. Very sweet, not somebody I get to see very often, but she and I have been exchanging text messages and some phone conversations about gardening, and she's got a garden in her backyard, And this year she installed a drip line, and so she asked me to come out and take a look at it and everything. And so we chatted about gardening and chatted about the world and chatted about the Lord and just had a lovely time of fellowship. But when I first got there, she kind of made a comment that got me thinking, and it was in regards to, you know, seeing her smaller than mine garden, and being nervous about me seeing her garden. But you know, here's the thing. Yes, I garden. I've got a good sized garden here. I got my raised bed garden out front, and I'm growing all sorts of things. But you know, I don't have all the answers. I'm not a guru, you know. I'm not the expert at growing all the things, but it is something that I enjoy doing. I find gardening, and I've said it before, I find gardening nourishing to the soul as much as the food is to the body. Being out here in the sunlight and getting my hands in the dirt and pulling weeds and just tending the garden. You know, in the book of Genesis, that was the plan. That was the plan, to tend the garden, and that was even before the fall. So I feel like, you know, gardening is just something that is part of who we are, the way God designed us. And so when I'm out here gardening and doing all the things, you know, it's just such a time of reflection and prayer and worship, and it's just, you feel the presence of God in the garden. You really do. And like I said, I don't have all the answers, but every year I learn something that I didn't know the year before. You know, every year there's going to be a challenge. There's going to be something that I'm going to have to figure out how to deal with and address and try to overcome. And that's how life is. I mean, life is going to have challenges. Life is going to have things that you've got to figure out and overcome, and not everything's going to work. But Lord willing, there will be another season. There'll be another year to try. So I don't have all the answers when it comes to gardening, but I do enjoy sharing what I know and sharing the process to help others to not feel intimidated. And I've had a bunch of people say that they cannot grow a garden, that they have a black thumb, that they can't, you know, raise plants or whatever. But I would say don't sell yourself short, because most houseplants come to my house to die. Okay? That is the honest to goodness truth, especially succulents. I cannot keep succulents alive to save my life. So if you are judging your gardening abilities according to your ability to keep houseplants, that's the wrong measuring stick to go by. It's two completely different things. You know, my first garden out here, my first like real spring garden, it was a disaster. I made a bunch of mistakes. I brought in soil to add to my garden because we have this terrible clay, and the soil that I brought in had noxious weeds all through it, the seeds. And to this day, I'm still finding those weeds only in the area where I had those original garden beds, but they're still around, and I'm still pulling those wicked things. I had seen a thing about using clover as mulch, like natural living mulch in your garden, and because it brings nitrogen into the soil, and you know, it was supposed to be amazing to grow in between rows of corn and things like that. So I tried it, did a video all about it. It was a disaster. It was, but I chose to actually take that video down, because while I am totally fine sharing my gardening mistakes with all of you so that you can learn from those learning opportunities, I didn't want someone to just see that video and go and do that and have a disastrous garden season like I did that year. So that video I did take down, but it's been a process. There's been things that I've never been able to grow before, like chamomile. I've tried growing chamomile. Last year is the very first year I ever got it to grow in my garden. I was beyond thrilled to see it and super excited that it came back again this year. And now that it's established, hopefully it will now be a perennial herb in my garden. That's my hopes. But that was many years of trying. So just because you haven't kept houseplants alive, or maybe you've tried gardening once or twice and it just didn't work out, don't give up. Don't give up. Because you never know when something might just click, and then you'll be hooked. And then you can enjoy being out in the sunlight and soaking up that vitamin D and having that wonderful, just fulfilling experience of growing the garden. You know, that first year when I tried to grow some green beans, I got about a handful of beans. Not even enough to do a serving for the family. About a handful. But I still enjoyed getting out there and going through the process. So, it is getting late. The sun has almost reached the tree line over there. So I think it is time to go do evening chores.